I want to get more on this. We're joined by Antony Loewenstein, who's a journalist and author of The Palestine Laboratory, who was previously based in occupied East Jerusalem for several years. We've been hearing there from our correspondent about the Israeli expansion in Gaza, about the troops on the ground and how they're moving. It seems, this progress is slowly across the enclave. What do you think is the Israelis' end game here? Do you think they're envisioning a total invasion of Gaza?
I think the Israeli aim is to still occupy vast parts of Gaza, and ideally what their vision is to remove as many Palestinians as possible from the enclave. I mean, they've said that openly. Then one of the things that often is so remarkable about the Western media coverage about this issue is how disconnected it is from what Israelis themselves are saying. Listen to Israeli politicians, military figures, the new chief of staff that Netanyahu just appointed recently. It's very clear that the aim is indefinite occupation. And if there's an inability, at least in the short term, to convince or bribe a lot of other nations to take Palestinians, Israel is talking to nations in Africa, such as Congo, South Sudan, Somaliland, incredibly poor countries, many of which are in war themselves. Israel's aim is essentially to build quasi-concentration camps in Gaza. Now, I'm not suggesting they're going to be the same as what we had in Nazi Europe, but concentration camps can be a variety of things where you essentially push and force as many Palestinians as possible into these tiny areas in various parts of Gaza and essentially cut them off. There is no international pressure to stop that. And just I note that the use of that word is obviously quite incendiary, but that is what a number of Israeli commentators and military figures are saying. This is the plan. And the world needs to wake up to the fact that this is what Israel is intending to do, and soon.
Some Israeli commentators continue to say that if Hamas were to release the hostages and lay down their arms, there would be an end to the fighting. Do you believe that?
No, I don't, because the aim of this war, if you want to call it that, or genocide, is not the destruction of Hamas. In fact, we've seen in the last 18 months a lot of evidence that Israel, in fact, is very keen to maintain Hamas's control in Gaza. Why? Because if you do that, you allow Netanyahu and his right-wing government to justify indefinite war. Hamas, in fact, is growing. Its militancy and its recruitment is increasing. That's based on US intelligence figures, Israeli intelligence figures. Hamas is not going anywhere, for better or worse. Hamas will exist. It's obviously been battered hugely in the last 18 months, but Hamas is not going anywhere. And ultimately, I think Israel wants Hamas to stay, as they had for the last many years before, when there was a blockade imposed by Israel and Egypt on Gaza, because that justifies, in the Israeli sense, backed by much of the West, an indefinite occupation and blockade of Gaza. And Netanyahu, by his decisions, is making it very clear that the priority of getting out Israeli hostages, of which there are, we don't even know exactly how many are alive, but at least a couple of dozen, is not the priority. The priority, in fact, is to suffocate Palestinians even more. And now, with the Trump administration, it was hardly not carte blanche with President Biden. But with Trump and the US and, frankly, much of, I would argue, the Arab world and Europe, which is distracted by Trump and Ukraine, there are no limits to what Israel can potentially do. And Netanyahu knows that, because he's openly saying in the media and on social media that the aim is to try to force Palestinians out. Listen to what the Israelis are saying. There is no hesitation in what they want to achieve. And the pressure against Israel to stop that is remarkably weak from around the world.
Okay, Antony Loewenstein, author of The Palestine Laboratory, thank you so much for joining us on TRT World.